They found me asleep on the nursery floor. Technically, I was on the plush alphabet rug, propped against the toy chest, one twin nestled in each arm. After 6 straight days of round-the-clock care, feeding, changing, singing, and playing with my grandchildren, exhaustion had finally won. It was the first time I'd closed my eyes for more than 20 minutes since my son and his wife had jetted off to Bali, leaving me with their 9-month-old twins. I awoke to the sound of a camera clicking, my daughter-in-law Amber's voice cutting through my fog of sleep. "Oh my God, look at her. We can't even trust her to stay awake. So lazy." My son Jackson stood behind her, chuckling. "Well, what did you expect from someone her age? Should have hired a real nanny instead." The twins were still sleeping peacefully against me, unharmed, well-fed, and perfectly safe. But as I blinked up at their sneering faces, two people who had never changed a diaper without complaint, who had left their babies with me while they lounged on a beach, something crystallized inside me. I am Madame Elena Coker-Williams. I built a real estate empire from nothing after my husband died. I put my ungrateful son through the finest schools. I paid for the very roof over their heads, the designer clothes on their backs, and the $2.3 million trust fund earmarked for my grandchildren's future. And in that moment, watching them mock me for simply closing my eyes after giving them yet another free gift, my time, my energy, my love, I made a decision that would change all our lives forever. "Yes," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Perhaps you should have." They had no idea what was coming, but they were about to learn that crossing the matriarch who holds the purse strings was the most expensive mistake they would ever make. Subscribe now if you've ever been taken for granted by the very people who owe you everything, and stay with me to discover how one lazy nap cost an ungrateful family their entire future. I was 32 when they placed Jackson in my arms, 10 tiny fingers, 10 perfect toes, and eyes that seemed to recognize me instantly. My miracle baby after years of believing I would never conceive. Howard, my husband, wept openly at the sight of his son, this tiny continuation of our shared dream. "He's going to have everything, Elena," Howard promised, kissing my forehead. "Everything we never had." We kept that promise, perhaps too well. Private tutors from age 3. Equestrian lessons by 5. European vacations every summer. The finest preparatory schools. Anything Jackson wanted, Jackson received, often before he even asked. Howard's investment banking career soared, my real estate ventures flourished, and our boy wanted for nothing. When Howard died suddenly of an aneurysm during Jackson's sophomore year of high school, my son became my entire world. I channeled my grief into ensuring his future remained pristine, untouched by the tragedy that had befallen us. "You are the continuation of your father's legacy," I told him on his 18th birthday, as I handed him the keys to a brand new Range Rover. "Make us both proud." He was accepted to Princeton, Howard's alma mater, on a legacy admission, despite grades that barely qualified him. I didn't mind supplementing his application with a generous donation to the alumni fund. That's what money was for, after all, smoothing the path for those you love. The summer before he left for college, I noticed a change in Jackson. A new restlessness. A tendency to stay out until dawn. When I expressed concern, he dismissed me with the easy confidence of a young man who has never faced consequences. "Relax, Mom," he'd say, kissing my cheek perfunctorily. "I'm just blowing off steam before I buckle down at Princeton." I believed him because I wanted to believe him. Because the alternative, that I had raised a son who valued privilege over responsibility, was too painful to contemplate. His freshman year passed in a blur of concerning phone calls from the dean's office, each one explaining away another incident: suspected cheating on an exam, insufficient evidence, property damage during a fraternity party paid for quietly, a plagiarized term paper, given a second chance due to his tragic family circumstances. I made excuses for him to others and to myself. He was grieving his father. He was adjusting to college life. He was finding himself. Then came the call during his sophomore fall semester. Mother, his voice sounded strange, tight. I need to talk to you about something important. I sat down at my desk, overlooking the Manhattan skyline from my penthouse office. What is it, darling? There's this girl. Amber. He hesitated. She's pregnant. The world tilted slightly. I see, I said carefully. And you're certain it's yours? Yes, he said quickly. Definitely. We've been together since last spring. This was the first I'd heard of any serious girlfriend. What does she want to do? She wants to keep it. Them, actually. The doctor says it's twins. Twins. My grandchildren. Despite the circumstances, something warmed inside me. Howard's bloodline continuing. I see, I said. And what do you want, Jackson? I want to do the right thing, he said, sounding for a moment like the sun I'd raised. I want to be there for her, for the babies. Admirable, I said. And your education? That's why I'm calling. We're thinking maybe we could take a semester off, figure things out, then go back and finish. If you'd help us. Of course I would help them. What choice did I have? These were my grandchildren, Jackson's future family. Despite the disappointment coiling in my stomach, I began mentally rearranging my life to accommodate this new reality. We'll need to meet, I said. You, me, and Amber. To discuss arrangements. Amber Tate was not what I expected. When they arrived at my penthouse the following weekend, I was struck first by her youth. She looked barely 18, though Jackson assured me she was 20, a sophomore like him. Petite, with wide blue eyes and honey blonde hair cascading over slender shoulders, she seemed almost childlike next to my 6-foot son. Mrs. Coker-Williams, she said, extending a delicate hand. Thank you for seeing us. Her voice surprised me, confident, clear, with the practiced politeness of someone raised with means. Over lunch, I learned that Amber was a psychology major from Greenwich, Connecticut. Father a surgeon, mother a former model turned philanthropist. She had chosen Princeton against her parents' wishes. They'd preferred Yale and had not yet told them about the pregnancy. They'll disown me, she said matter-of-factly, sipping water. They have very traditional values. I studied her as she spoke, noting the designer watch on her wrist, the perfect manicure, the subtle but expensive highlights in her hair. This was not a girl accustomed to hardship. And what are your plans? I asked. Both of you. They exchanged a glance laden with the unearned confidence of youth. We thought we'd get an apartment near campus, Jackson began. Take a semester off when the babies are born, then go back to school in the fall. With the babies, I clarified. Well, Amber interjected, we were hoping to find a nanny situation. Or perhaps family support. Her eyes fixed on me meaningfully. Family support. Me. I see, I said. And financially? Another glance between them. We know you've set aside money for my education, Mother, Jackson said carefully. We thought perhaps some of that could be redirected for now. I sat back, observing them both. So young. So unaware of what they were asking. Yet these were my grandchildren they carried. Howard's legacy. Here's what I propose, I said finally. I'll purchase a 3-bedroom condo near campus. I'll establish a household account for groceries, utilities, and basic necessities. I'll create trust funds for the children's education. And I'll pay for appropriate childcare when you're in classes. Relief washed over their faces. But I continued, holding up one finger. You will both complete your degrees. You will both participate in raising these children. And Jackson, you will maintain at least a 3.0 GPA from this point forward. Of course, Mother, he said eagerly. Thank you. This means everything to us. Don't thank me yet, I warned. Parenthood is not what you think it is. It will test everything you believe about yourselves. They nodded solemnly, but I could see they weren't really listening. They thought the hard part was over, telling me, securing financial support. They had no idea what was coming. Neither did I. The twins, Elijah Howard and Emma Grace, arrived 3 weeks early on a snowy February morning. I flew to New Jersey as soon as Jackson called, arriving at the hospital to find my son pacing the waiting room, wild-eyed with panic. They took her for an emergency C-section, he explained, running his hands through his hair. Something about fetal distress. I led him to a chair, trying to project a calm I didn't feel. The doctors know what they're doing, I assured him. This happens all the time with twins. 3 hours later, we stood over 2 incubators in the NICU, gazing at tiny beings who barely resembled babies yet, red-faced, impossibly small, wrapped in wires and monitoring equipment. 5 pounds each, the nurse told us proudly. Excellent for twins. They just need a little help with their breathing. Amber was recovering from the surgery, heavily medicated and sleeping. Jackson stared at his children, a mixture of terror and wonder on his face. I don't know how to do this, Mother, he whispered. For the first time since the pregnancy announcement, I felt a genuine connection to my son. Nobody does at first, I told him, squeezing his hand. But you'll learn. I stayed for 2 weeks, helping them transition from hospital to home. The condo I'd purchased was spacious and bright, overlooking a tree-lined street near campus. I'd hired a decorator to prepare the nursery. 2 elegant white cribs, a comfortable rocking chair, a changing table stocked with every possible supply. Amber seemed overwhelmed by the reality of 2 newborns. She complained constantly about the pain from her incision, about her interrupted sleep, about the weight she'd gained during pregnancy. I used to be a size 2, she lamented, staring at herself in the mirror. Now look at me. You just had major surgery and delivered 2 human beings, I reminded her. Your body needs time to heal. Jackson's starting to look at other girls again. I can feel it. I doubted this. My son looked too exhausted to notice anything beyond the immediate needs of the babies. He was trying, I had to give him that. He changed diapers without complaint, took night shifts with the twins, attended every pediatrician appointment. The day before I was scheduled to return to New York, I sat Jackson down for a serious conversation. I'm having a nurse come 3 days a week, I told him, just until the babies are sleeping through the night. She'll help Amber recover and give you both a break to focus on schoolwork. Relief flooded his face. Thank you, Mother. You have no idea how much that helps. I've also set up the trust funds we discussed, I continued. 1 million each for Elijah and Emma, earmarked for education and accessible when they turn 18. You're incredible, he said, hugging me tightly. I don't know what we'd do without you. What indeed, I thought, hugging him back. The golden handcuffs were securely in place. My financial support ensuring my continued presence in my grandchildren's lives. Over the next 8 months, a pattern emerged. Jackson and Amber would struggle with the twins. I would offer additional support. They would accept gratefully. The part-time nurse became a full-time nanny. The household allowance doubled, then tripled. I paid for therapy when Amber was diagnosed with postpartum depression. I covered the cost when they decided they needed a larger vehicle to accommodate 2 car seats. Every few weeks, I drove from Manhattan to New Jersey to spend time with the twins, watching with delight as they grew and developed. Elijah had Howard's deep-set eyes and serious expression. Emma had his musical laugh. They were perfect, even as their parents increasingly were not. Jackson managed to maintain his GPA requirement, but only just. Amber dropped to part-time student status, then withdrew entirely, claiming the stress was too much. I can go back later, she said dismissively when I expressed concern. The children need me now. Yet whenever I visited, it was the nanny, a capable Jamaican woman named Pauline, who seemed to be doing most of the childcare. Amber was usually shopping at the salon or taking a mental health day with friends. Jackson, to his credit, tried to balance his responsibilities, but the strain showed. He called me late one night during their first fall semester back at school, his voice tight with frustration. "I can't do this anymore, Mother. The babies are teething and screaming all night. I have midterms next week. Amber's out with her friends again. I'm drowning here." "What do you need?" I ask simply. "Can you come? Just for a few days? Pauline's on vacation, and I just need to catch up on sleep and studying." I rearranged my schedule, postponed 3 important meetings, and was at their door by noon the next day. The apartment was in disarray, dishes piled in the sink, laundry overflowing hampers, toys scattered across every surface. The twins, now 9 months old, lit up when they saw me. "Mama," Elijah called, his first word. Emma crawled to me at lightning speed, pulling herself up on my pant leg. My heart swelled. These precious creatures had become the center of my world. Jackson looked terrible, dark circles under his eyes, hair unwashed, wearing the same Princeton sweatshirt I'd seen him in during my previous visit. "Thank God you're here," he said, collapsing onto the sofa. "I haven't slept more than 2 hours straight in days." "Where's Amber?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Study group," he said without meeting my eyes. We both knew it wasn't true. "Go shower," I told him gently. "Then sleep. I've got the twins." For the next 6 days, I was effectively a single parent to my grandchildren. I fell into an efficient routine, feeding, playing, napping, bathing, finding a joy in their care that I hadn't experienced since Jackson was small. Without the pressure of running my business simultaneously, I could be fully present with them. Jackson emerged periodically from his room to study or help with bedtime, expressing constant gratitude for my presence. Amber appeared briefly on the 3rd day, bringing home takeout and making a show of kissing the babies before retreating to the bedroom with a migraine. On the 6th day, I was playing with the twins in the nursery. We'd had a busy morning, a walk to the park, lunch, and a bath after Emma decided to finger paint with her pureed carrots. Now we were on the alphabet rug, reading books and stacking blocks. The warm afternoon sun streamed through the nursery window, creating a golden glow around us. Elijah crawled into my lap with his favorite board book. Emma was already curled against my side, her eyelids growing heavy. I read to them softly, feeling the weight of their small bodies grow heavier as they drifted toward sleep. The next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes to the sound of a camera clicking and Amber's voice, sharp with contempt. "Oh my God, look at her. We can't even trust her to stay awake. So lazy." Jackson stood behind her, chuckling. "Well, what did you expect from someone her age? Should have hired a real nanny instead." I blinked, disoriented. The twins were still sleeping peacefully in my arms, unharmed, well-fed, perfectly safe. The room was darker now. I'd been asleep perhaps an hour. Outside the window, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the nursery floor. "What time is it?" I asked, my voice rough with sleep. "Almost 6, Amber said, still recording with her phone. "We've been home for 20 minutes. Found you passed out on the job." The contempt in her voice cut through my fog of sleep. I looked down at the twins, peaceful and secure in my arms, then back up at the sneering faces of my son and his wife. "The children are fine," I said evenly. "They fell asleep after their afternoon play session. As did I." "That's not the point," Amber said, finally lowering her phone. She was immaculately dressed in resort wear, her skin sporting a deep golden tan from the Bali sun. "We trusted you to watch them, not sleep on the clock." "On the clock?" I repeated, the phrase igniting something inside me. I wasn't aware I was an employee. Jackson at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. She didn't mean it like that, Mother. Didn't I? Amber crossed her arms. We specifically asked her to come because Pauline is on vacation. She's filling in as the nanny. Nannies don't take naps with the babies on the floor. I wasn't planning to fall asleep, I said, carefully shifting to stand while holding both twins. My back protested after an hour on the floor, but I ignored the pain. It happened while we were reading. Exactly my point, Amber said triumphantly. You're way too old for this. We should have found someone younger, more alert. Jackson said nothing to defend me, just watched with that same uncomfortable half-smile. I laid the still-sleeping twins in their cribs, taking a moment to compose myself before turning back to face them. These people, this entitled young woman and my silent son, had left their children in my care for 6 days without so much as a check-in call. They'd vacationed in a luxury resort while I canceled business meetings worth millions. And now they had the audacity to criticize me for closing my eyes after giving them yet another free gift, my time, my energy, my love. Perhaps you're right, I said, my voice deadly calm. Perhaps you should have hired a professional nanny instead of relying on your lazy old mother. Mother, Jackson began, but I held up a hand to silence him. I'll be returning to New York tonight, I continued. I'm sure you can handle your own children for one evening, considering how refreshed you must be after your vacation. Fine by me, Amber muttered. We need to get back to normal anyway. Normal? As if their entire existence wasn't built upon my generosity. I think that's an excellent idea, I said, moving past them to collect my things from the guest room. Back to normal indeed. As I packed my overnight bag, I could hear them in the kitchen, Amber complaining about room service at their resort, Jackson opening the refrigerator I had stocked, neither of them checking on the twins who were now stirring in their cribs. I made a call to my driver, then another to my attorney's direct line. He answered on the second ring, despite the late hour. Jonathan, it's Elena. I need some documents revised immediately. Yes, it's urgent. I'll be at your office first thing tomorrow. When I emerged with my bag, Jackson was heating bottles while Amber scrolled through her phone, showing him photos from their trip. You should have seen the infinity pool, she was saying. Absolute paradise. I'm leaving now, I announced. My driver is downstairs. Jackson looked up, surprised. Already? I thought you might stay for dinner. We brought you a gift from Bali. A gift. As if a duty-free trinket could balance the scales. Another time, I said. I have early meetings tomorrow. Suit yourself, Amber shrugged, not looking up from her phone. Thanks for filling in. Filling in. Like a substitute teacher. A temporary placeholder. Jackson at least walked me to the door. Thanks again, Mother. You're a lifesaver. Am I? I asked quietly. He frowned, catching something in my tone. Of course. We couldn't manage without you. That at least was honest. They couldn't manage without me, without my money, my support, my constant bailouts. Good night, Jackson, I said, kissing his cheek briefly. Give the twins a kiss from their grandmother. In the elevator, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes, the weight of realization settling over me. I had created this situation. My generosity had enabled their entitlement. My reluctance to enforce boundaries had allowed them to believe they deserved endless support without gratitude or respect. As my driver pulled away from the curb, I looked up at the window of the condo I had purchased. Through the glass, I could see Jackson and Amber, already arguing about something, neither of them holding the twins who would now be fully awake and hungry. Lazy, she had called me, for falling asleep after 6 days of constant childcare. A strange calm settled over me. I had made a decision in that nursery that would change all our lives. Now, it was time to implement it. Jonathan Weiss had been my attorney for over 20 years. He had handled Howard's estate, my business acquisitions, and every significant financial decision I'd made since becoming a widow. His corner office overlooking Central Park was where I found myself at 7:30 the next morning, a stack of documents between us. "You're certain about this, Selena?" he asked, his silver eyebrows drawing together in concern. "It's substantial." "I'm certain," I confirmed, signing where he indicated. "The trust funds are to be dissolved immediately. The assets liquidated and transferred to my main account." "And the condo?" "Sell it," I said without hesitation. "Give them 90 days' notice, as legally required." Jonathan adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "And the household allowance?" "Terminated as of today." He sighed, shuffling the papers. "May I ask what precipitated this? You've been extraordinarily generous with Jackson and Amber for nearly 2 years." I considered how to explain. How to articulate the moment when I realized I was being used, disrespected, taken for granted by the very people who owed me everything. "They called me lazy," I said simply, "for falling asleep while caring for the twins after they left them with me for 6 days to vacation in Bali." Jonathan's eyebrows shot up. "I see. Do you?" I leaned forward. "They mock me for being too old, too slow, too traditional. Yet they live entirely on my charity. They expect me to fund their lifestyle, raise their children, and ask for nothing in return, not even basic respect." He nodded slowly. "And what about your grandchildren? The twins?" A pang of regret shot through me. "I'm not abandoning them," I clarified. "I'm establishing appropriate boundaries with their parents. I'll still be their grandmother. I'll still see them, love them, be present in their lives. But I will not continue to enable Jackson and Amber's entitled behavior. You realize this will likely create significant conflict." "I'm counting on it," I said grimly. "Sometimes a forest fire is necessary for new growth." By noon, the paperwork was complete. $2 million in trust funds dissolved. The 3-bedroom luxury condo, listed for sale. The household allowance, terminated. I instructed my assistant to block Jackson and Amber's numbers for the remainder of the day. I needed time to prepare for the inevitable storm. That evening, I treated myself to dinner at my favorite restaurant, a quiet, elegant French bistro where the maitre d' knew my preferences without asking. As I sipped a perfectly chilled glass of Sancerre, my phone lit up with a text from my niece Charlotte. "Aunt Elena, is everything okay? Jackson's been calling me nonstop trying to reach you." Charlotte was my late sister's daughter, a brilliant young woman who had put herself through medical school and was now completing her residency in pediatric neurology. Unlike my son, she had never expected or demanded financial support, though I had occasionally offered it. She was the daughter I wished I'd had, determined, compassionate, and fiercely independent. "Everything is fine," I replied. "I'm making some necessary changes. I'll explain when I see you Sunday for brunch." I could almost feel Jackson's panic through the airwaves, his desperate attempts to reach me, to understand what was happening. By now, he would have received the automated notification from the Trust Fund Administration. Perhaps he'd already called the management company that handled the household account and discovered it had been closed. Good. Let him feel the ground shifting beneath him. Let him experience, for once, the consequences of his actions. The next morning, I instructed my doorman to admit Jackson if he appeared, which I suspected he would. Sure enough, by 10 a.m., Fernando called up to announce his arrival. "Send him up," I said, smoothing my silk blouse and taking a steadying breath. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my son. Gone was the polished Princeton student. In his place stood a wild-eyed young man with stubble on his cheeks and desperation in his eyes. "Mother," he said without preamble. "What have you done?" I gestured for him to enter. "I've made some financial adjustments. Please sit down." "Adjustments?" His voice cracked. "You've destroyed us. The trusts are gone. The household account is empty. The property management company called to say the condo is being sold, not destroyed. I corrected calmly. Simply return to reality. Please, Jackson. Sit. He collapsed onto my sofa, running his hands through his disheveled hair. Why are you doing this? If this is about what Amber said, it's about far more than that, I interrupted. Though her comments were certainly illuminating. She didn't mean it, he insisted. She was jet-lagged, irritable. You know how she is. Indeed I do. Entitled, ungrateful, and disrespectful. But this isn't solely about Amber. It's about you too, Jackson. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Me? What did I do? You stood there, I said quietly. You watched your wife mock me, belittle me, treat me like hired help. And you said nothing. You even laughed. It was just a joke, he protested weakly. No, it wasn't. It was a glimpse into how you both truly see me, as a convenience, a resource to be exploited, not as a person deserving of respect or gratitude. He stared at me, a dawning horror in his eyes. So you're punishing us? Taking everything away because your feelings were hurt. I'm not punishing you, I clarified. I'm allowing you to experience the natural consequences of your behavior. The trust funds were a gift, not an obligation. The condo, the allowance, all gifts. Gifts you've taken for granted, even scorned. But what about the twins? He demanded. They're innocent in this. They are, I agreed. And I will continue to be their loving grandmother. But their financial support is now your responsibility, as it should have been from the beginning. How are we supposed to manage? His voice rose in panic. We're still in school. We have no income. Many young parents work while attending school, I pointed out. Many take out student loans. Many make sacrifices for their children. You and Amber will now join their ranks. This is insane, he muttered, standing to pace my living room. You can't just cut us off without warning. Consider the warning delivered last night, I said, rising to face him. When your wife called me lazy for falling asleep after caring for your children for 6 straight days while you enjoyed a luxury vacation that I indirectly funded. He had no response to that, just continued pacing, his face cycling through expressions of disbelief, anger, and fear. What do you want? He finally asked. An apology?
Fine, I'm sorry.
We're both sorry. I don't want an apology, I said. I want you to grow up, to take responsibility for your choices, your children, your life. By making us homeless? By forcing us to drop out? You have 90 days before you need to vacate the condo. Plenty of time to find alternative housing. As for school, perhaps a break would do you both good. Time to focus on what really matters. This is cruel, he said, his voice breaking. I never thought you could be so heartless. The accusation stung, but I held firm. What's cruel is raising a son who believes he's entitled to endless financial support while treating the provider of that support with contempt. His face hardened. You'll regret this, he warned. You won't see the twins again. Amber won't allow it. That would be unfortunate, I acknowledged. For them and for me. But it won't change my decision. He stared at me for a long moment, searching for the mother who had always given in, always rescued, always cushioned his fall. She was gone. This isn't over, he said, finally moving toward the door. On that we agree, I replied. This is just the beginning of your adult life. After he left, I sat quietly in my living room, waiting for the guilt to overwhelm me. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a curious lightness, as if I'd set down a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. The storm had arrived, just as I'd predicted. Now it was time to weather it. The next month unfolded exactly as I had anticipated. Jackson and Amber launched a campaign of emotional warfare, alternating between pleading, threatening, and guilt-tripping in an attempt to change my mind. First came the desperate phone calls, which I allowed my assistant to screen. Then the emotional emails, which I read but did not answer. Finally, the flying monkeys, mutual acquaintances, distant relatives, even their academic advisor from Princeton, all calling to express concern about my decision. I remained resolute. The financial ties had been severed. There was no going back. Charlotte, bless her, was my steadfast supporter through it all. During our Sunday brunch the weekend after my confrontation with Jackson, I explained everything. "The entitlement is breathtaking," she commented, shaking her head. "Calling you lazy after you essentially gave them a free week of childcare? While they were in Bali?" "Precisely," I said, grateful for her understanding. It was the culmination of 2 years of increasingly disrespectful behavior. "You did the right thing, Annalena," she assured me. "Though I imagine you're worried about the twins." As always, she cut straight to the heart of my concern. "I am," I admitted. "I don't want them to suffer because of their parents' choices." "The twins will adapt," she said simply. "Children are resilient. And perhaps this is the wake-up call Jackson and Amber need to become actual parents instead of playing house on your dime." Her wisdom, as usual, was exactly what I needed to hear. At the 6-week mark, the condo sold, more quickly than even I had anticipated, thanks to the prime location and growing real estate market. Jackson and Amber now had exactly 45 days to vacate. Through my extensive network, I kept tabs on their situation without direct contact. I learned they had both withdrawn from Princeton for the semester. The household allowance termination had left them scrambling to cover basic expenses. Amber had taken a job at a department store cosmetics counter, while Jackson was bartending nights at a campus pub. The nanny, Pauline, had been let go. They could no longer afford her services. "They're selling everything," Charlotte reported during one of our weekly brunches. "Designer clothes, electronics, even Amber's engagement ring." "And the twins?" I asked, unable to suppress my concern. "In daycare, while they both work." Not the elite preschool they'd been talking about, just a basic facility near their new apartment. New apartment. So they'd found housing after being forced to leave the condo. "Where are they living now?" I inquired, keeping my tone casual. Charlotte grimaced. "A 2-bedroom walk-up in the worst part of New Brunswick. Jackson sleeps on the couch. Amber complains constantly about the noise, the neighbors, the lack of security. She tried going home to her parents, but they refused to take her in with the twins. Something about making her bed and lying in it." I couldn't suppress a grim smile. Apparently, Amber's parents operated by the same principles I did: consequences for poor choices. 3 months after what I now called the reckoning, the situation deteriorated further. Jackson lost his bartending job after too many shift changes to accommodate childcare. Amber quit the department store, claiming the hours were inhuman and the work beneath her. They fell behind on rent for the shabby apartment. Eviction followed swiftly. With nowhere else to turn, they began couch surfing with increasingly reluctant friends. The twins, now mobile and vocal toddlers, were shuttled from place to place, their lives lacking the stability children need. I monitored all this from a distance, my resolve occasionally wavering but never breaking. This was the natural consequence of their choices, their entitlement, their disrespect. I had not created the situation. I had merely stopped preventing it. "They've split up," Charlotte told me one evening in early spring, 6 months after the reckoning. "Amber called Jackson worthless, blamed him for not fixing things with you. He said she was spoiled and useless, never actually parenting the twins." "Where are they now?" I asked. "Jackson's sleeping in his car. Amber and the twins are staying with her sorority sister, but that's only temporary." Charlotte hesitated. "She's talking about giving up custody." "Giving up custody?" I repeated, genuinely shocked. "Of her own children?" "She says she can't provide for them properly in these conditions. Claims it would be better for them to be in foster care than living like this." Charlotte's disgust was evident. What she really wants is for you to swoop in and restore the trust funds so she can go back to her comfortable life. A cold fury settled in my chest. Using the twins as emotional leverage was despicable, even for Amber. She's bluffing, I said flatly. She knows abandoning her children would destroy any chance of reconciliation with her parents. They may not want the twins in their home, but they certainly won't condone their daughter surrendering her children to the state. What if she's not bluffing? Charlotte asked quietly. I considered this possibility. Then I'll intervene for the twins only. But not a penny will go to Amber or Jackson. They made their choices. But Amber was indeed bluffing. When her threat failed to produce the desired result, she tried a new tactic, moving back to Connecticut and taking the twins with her, leaving Jackson behind in New Jersey. She's living in a studio apartment near her parents' house, Charlotte reported. They're still refusing to take her in, but they're paying for the apartment and giving her a small allowance. Just enough to cover basics, not enough for her to live the lifestyle she's accustomed to. And Jackson? Devastated. He's been denied access to the twins. Amber won't answer his calls, blocked him on everything. He's picked up 2 minimum wage jobs, trying to save enough for a lawyer to fight for visitation. I nodded, unsurprised. Amber had always been coldly pragmatic. Cutting Jackson loose, while securing support from her parents, was exactly the move I'd expect from her. And how is he handling it? I asked, not out of softness but simple curiosity. Charlotte shrugged, working himself to exhaustion. Living in a room he rents from some elderly couple. Drinking too much when he's not working. He's hit rock bottom, and Elena. Sometimes that's necessary, I said dispassionately. Rock bottom can be the foundation upon which people rebuild. 9 months after the reckoning, I received an unexpected text message from a number I didn't recognize. Mrs. Coker-Williams, this is Amber. I know you probably hate me, but this isn't about me. It's about the twins. They need their medical insurance renewed. I can't afford the premiums, and my parents refused to help with this specific expense because it was something you always covered. Please, just this one thing. For Elijah and Emma. I deleted the message without responding. If the medical insurance lapsed, Amber could enroll the twins in state-provided coverage. It wouldn't offer the premium care my policy had, but it would ensure basic needs were met. Another consequence, another adjustment to their new reality. A week later, I received a formal letter from a Connecticut law firm representing Amber. It requested the release of assets from the dissolved trust funds for the medical care and welfare of the minor children. It was accompanied by a thinly veiled threat of legal action for endangering the well-being of the minors through financial abandonment. I forwarded the letter to Jonathan, who called me within the hour. This is entirely without merit, he assured me. You have no legal obligation to provide financial support to your grandchildren. The trusts were voluntary gifts that you had every right to dissolve. And the medical insurance? Again, no legal obligation. Morally, one might argue different positions, but legally, you're in the clear. Good, I said firmly. Decline their request. Formally. Make it clear that no further communication on this subject will be entertained. 1 year after the reckoning, I invited Charlotte to my penthouse for a special dinner. We enjoyed fine cuisine prepared by my personal chef, vintage wine from Howard's collection, and stimulating conversation about her advancing medical career. Over dessert, I broached the real purpose of the evening. I've made some changes to my will and estate planning, I said casually. I wanted you to be aware of them. Charlotte looked up from her creme brulee, surprise evident in her eyes.
Oh,
is everything all right with your health? Perfectly fine, I assured her. But at 60, one must be practical about these matters, especially given recent family developments. She nodded understanding, waiting for me to continue. I've removed Jackson as my primary heir, I stated plainly. The bulk of my estate, The real estate holdings, investment portfolio, liquid assets, and this penthouse will now go to you. Charlotte's spoon clattered against her plate. Aunt Elena, I don't know what to say. There's nothing to say, I replied calmly. You've demonstrated the values I most respect: independence, integrity, compassion without enabling. You've earned your own success without entitlement or expectation. These are the qualities I wish to reward. She shook her head, clearly overwhelmed. What about the twins? And Jackson? I've established small trusts for the twins, accessible when they turn 25 and only for education or healthcare. Not lifestyle support, not accessible by either parent. As for Jackson, I paused. He will receive a modest inheritance. Enough to prevent destitution, not enough to return to his former lifestyle. Have you told him? She asked quietly. No, I said. And I don't intend to. This isn't about punishment anymore, Charlotte. It's about acknowledging reality. Jackson and Amber proved themselves unworthy of significant wealth through their choices, their ingratitude, their fundamental disrespect. They've suffered tremendously this past year, she observed. Not a criticism, just a statement of fact. Yes, I acknowledged. And that suffering was entirely preventable, not by me, but by them. By working responsibly, by living within their means, by practicing basic human gratitude for the extraordinary advantages they were given. Charlotte nodded slowly. I understand. And I'm deeply honored by your trust in me. I promise I won't squander it. I know you won't, I said simply. That's precisely why I've made this decision. 18 months after the reckoning, life had settled into a new pattern. Amber remained in Connecticut, working part-time at her father's medical practice, while her parents provided minimal support for basic necessities. The twins, now approaching their third birthday, attended a modest daycare while she worked. Jackson had managed to pull himself partially out of his downward spiral. After hitting true rock bottom, a brief stint of homelessness following a dispute with his elderly landlords, he'd found steady work as a night security guard, moved into a Spartan efficiency apartment, and started taking community college classes during the day. He fought for and eventually won limited visitation rights to the twins, one weekend a month, which required him to travel to Connecticut and stay in cheap motels during his visits. Neither of them attempted to contact me directly anymore. They had finally accepted that the Bank of Elena was permanently closed. Charlotte, ever compassionate, kept me informed about the twins' development and Jackson's slow steps toward self-sufficiency. I appreciated the information, but maintained my distance. The wounds hadn't healed, nor should they. Some betrayals leave permanent scars, reminders of lessons painfully learned. 2 years after the reckoning, I made a significant business decision. Selling my real estate empire to a major development corporation for a substantial profit. At 62, I was ready to simplify my professional life, focus on strategic investments rather than active property management. The sale made headlines in financial publications. Coker Williams Enterprises sells for estimated $175 million. Read the Wall Street Journal. My phone immediately began ringing with congratulatory calls from business associates, friends, distant relatives suddenly remembering my existence. Conspicuously absent were calls from Jackson or Amber. They had seen the news, Charlotte confirmed as much, but neither dared to reach out. Perhaps they had finally learned their lesson. More likely, they knew any contact would be rebuffed, any request dismissed. I used a portion of the proceeds to establish a foundation funding educational opportunities for single parents, a cause I believed in deeply. Charlotte joined the board of directors, bringing her medical expertise and compassionate perspective to our grant-making decisions. The irony wasn't lost on me that while Jackson and Amber struggled to afford community college classes, I was helping strangers complete their degrees. But these strangers approached their education with gratitude, determination, and respect, qualities my son and his wife had failed to demonstrate when given every advantage. 3 years after the reckoning, I received a letter from Jackson. Not an email, not a text, an actual handwritten letter on inexpensive stationery. I nearly discarded it unopened. What could he possibly say that would matter now? But curiosity prevailed, and I sliced open the envelope with my silver letter opener. Mother, I don't expect a response to this letter. I don't deserve one. This isn't a request for money or help or reconciliation. It's simply an acknowledgement of truth that's long overdue. You were right to cut us off. We were entitled, ungrateful, and disrespectful. We took your generosity for granted, treated you like an ATM instead of a person deserving of basic dignity. The lazy comment from Amber was inexcusable, but my silent complicity was worse. I stood there and let her demean you after everything you'd done for us. There's no justification for that. These 3 years have been the hardest of my life. I've experienced hunger, homelessness, and humiliation. I've worked jobs I once would have considered beneath me. I've learned the true value of $1, the true meaning of sacrifice. I won't pretend I've become some perfect person. I still struggle with bitterness sometimes. I still miss the life we had. But I understand now that it was never my life to begin with. It was a gift I neither earned nor appreciated properly. The twins ask about you occasionally. I've told them their grandmother is a strong, successful woman who loves them but lives far away. I show them your picture from the business section of the journal. I want them to know where they come from, even if that connection has been severed. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect restoration. I just wanted you to know that your difficult choice accomplished what you intended. I've grown up, finally, at the cost of everything I took for granted. Jackson, I read the letter twice, searching for manipulation between the lines, for hidden requests or subtle guilt trips. Finding none, I placed it in my desk drawer rather than the trash. Not because it changed anything, it didn't, but because it represented the only thing I had ever truly wanted from my son, honest acknowledgement of his behavior without expectation of reward. Too little, too late, but acknowledgement nonetheless. I did not reply. Words had always flowed too easily between us, promises made and broken, apologies offered and forgotten. This time, silence would speak for me. Not cruel silence, not punitive silence, just the quiet acknowledgement that some bridges, once burned, cannot be rebuilt. 5 years after the reckoning, Charlotte invited me to dinner at her home, a lovely brownstone she had purchased with her surgeon salary, no financial assistance required. Over coffee in her tasteful living room, she broached a delicate subject. "The twins are starting kindergarten next week," she said, showing me photos on her phone. Elijah and Emma, now 5 years old, grinned at the camera in matching first day of school outfits. "They've gotten so big." "They have," I agreed, studying their faces. Elijah had Howard's eyes, Emma his determined chin. "My grandchildren, yet strangers to me." "Jackson's doing better," she continued carefully. "He graduated from community college, transferred to Rutgers, working full-time while finishing his degree. No more security guard job, he's in IT support now, something with actual career potential." I nodded, neither encouraged nor discouraged by this information. Amber's engaged to a dermatologist from her father's practice. Older man, established. She's pushing for full custody, using Jackson's limited financial resources against him in court. This didn't surprise me. Amber had always been calculating, always looking for the easiest path to comfort. "Is there a reason you're telling me this?" I asked gently. Charlotte set down her coffee cup. "The twins have a school project about family trees. They've been asking questions about you, specific questions Jackson can't easily deflect anymore. They want to know why they've never met their grandmother." "And what has he told them?" "That you live far away. That adults sometimes have disagreements." That maybe someday they'll meet you. She hesitated. Annalena, it's been 5 years. The twins are innocent in all this. Would you consider meeting them? Just once. I considered this request carefully. My grudge was with their parents, not with these children who happened to share my bloodline. Yet maintaining boundaries had been essential to my healing, to my reclamation of dignity. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked. A neutral meeting. The children only, not Jackson or Amber. I could bring them to the city for an afternoon. No expectations, no pressure for ongoing relationship unless you want it. Just giving them a face to put with the name grandmother. The proposition was tempting. I had missed so many milestones, so many precious moments of their early development. But I had made my choice 5 years ago, and consistency mattered. I appreciate the suggestion, I said finally. But I think it's better to maintain the current arrangement. Meeting once would only confuse them, create expectations that might not be fulfilled. Charlotte nodded, disappointment evident, but not pressing further. She understood boundaries better than most. If circumstances change significantly in the future, I might reconsider, I added. But for now, this is the appropriate distance. The twins started school without meeting their grandmother. Life continued. My real estate investments flourished under careful management. Charlotte became chief resident at her hospital. Jackson completed his Rutgers degree and secured mid-level IT employment. Amber married her dermatologist, moved into his Westchester mansion, and reduced her parenting to alternating weekends when required by the custody agreement. 10 years later, I celebrated my 70th birthday with an intimate dinner, just Charlotte, her fiancé, and a few close friends.
No Jackson, no Amber, no twins.
The grandchildren were now 10 years old, entering their preteen years without knowing me beyond photos and sparse stories. Did I regret this separation? Occasionally, in quiet moments, but regret is not the same as mistake. I had made the right decision for my circumstances, my dignity, my peace of mind. The price had been high, losing relationship with my grandchildren, but the alternative would have been worse. Continuing to enable disrespect and entitlement, teaching the next generation that wealth came without obligation, that providers could be mocked without consequence. As I blew out the candles on my elegant cake, I made no wish for reconciliation. That chapter was closed, that possibility extinguished by years of maintained boundaries. Instead, I wished for continued clarity, continued purpose, continued freedom from the golden handcuffs I had inadvertently created through my own generosity. The lazy grandmother had outlasted them all, outlasted their manipulations, their expectations, their assumptions about what they were owed. I had reclaimed my dignity, my agency, my right to be respected rather than merely used. And in doing so, I had taught the most valuable lesson of all, that actions have consequences, that respect must be earned, that even the most generous benefactor has limits when pushed too far. Let them remember that lesson, if nothing else. Let them carry it forward, perhaps passing it to Elijah and Emma in ways they had failed to comprehend themselves. Let my legacy be not the money I withheld, but the boundary I established. For in the end, the most powerful word in any matriarch's vocabulary is not yes, but no. If you've ever been taken for granted, disrespected, or humiliated by the very people who benefit most from your generosity, remember this. You always have the power to change the dynamic. You always have the right to demand respect. And sometimes, the most valuable gift you can give an entitled adult is the opportunity to experience the natural consequences of their own behavior. Subscribe now if this story resonated with you, and share in the comments a time when you had to make the difficult choice between giving in and standing up for your own dignity. Because the most valuable inheritance we can leave isn't money or property. It's the lesson that respect must be earned, not demanded, and gratitude should be the natural response to generosity, not entitlement.